At McDonald's, it's great. You deserve a break today.
Good morning, America. That is the second best commercial McDonald's ever made. The best commercial was yesterday when former and future President Donald Trump worked the window in Pennsylvania. Joining me to discuss this and other topics, Michael Duncan, one of the co-hosts of the Ruthless podcast. Duncan, good morning. You're not even old enough to remember that jingle, are you?
No, I guess not. But they say I'm an old soul, you know? I'm the old
Yeah.
man of the variety program.
Duncan, tell me what your background is. I know the other guys a little bit, but were you part of the McConnellist gang of four as well?
Yeah, I got hired in the 2014 campaign as the digital consultant on the race. So that's how I got to know Josh and John. Josh was leading the effort, and Ashbrook was the communications expert. And then sort of after the 2014 cycle, I went over to Israel and I was a consultant on Netanyahu's 2015 campaign. That was the snap election. And Josh and John, sort of called me up and were like, hey, we're thinking about, starting this new company. Would you be interested? And I was. And that will be, a decade now in March since we started Cavalry, our consulting firm. And yeah, I mean, we did McConnell's 2020 election, a host of other things. And yeah, I mean, started Ruthless now, I guess 4 years ago.
Ruthless is the most influential conservative podcast in America. And I listen to it religiously, and I'm trying to hit for the cycle. You're the double, by the way, Michael Duncan. Holmes is the leadoff hitter. He was the single. And the homer literally is Ashbrook because he's from Ohio. So you're the double. Of course, the triple and the hardest thing to get when you hit for the cycle is smug. And so I'm working hard on that. What did smug ever work for McConnell?
No. I mean, we basically met Smug the way everyone meets Smug, through Twitter.
I've never met Smug, so it'll be an interesting conversation. So, Michael, I want to know, first of all, do you guys have a plan for Ruthless? My plan is to get you on HBO before or after Mars so they can see what a real show would bring in terms of ratings. But what's your plan for Ruthless podcast?
We really didn't have a plan. And I think that's probably the key to its success is, we started this thing during the pandemic, when DC was shut down and we were basically forced in our homes. And we used to just get together for a happy hour Zoom at the end of the day. So we just talk about what we were doing, drink a little bit of bourbon. And after a while, we just sort of like, this would be a good podcast. And so that's why we started it. And I mean, honestly, it's just that sort of chemistry amongst friends that I think is what makes, Ruthless work. Would I like to do more with it? Absolutely. I feel like conservatives, Republicans, people on the right don't invest enough time in media. We spend billions of dollars in think tanks and super PACs, and the left gets this. They understand this. They understand that politics is downstream of culture, and to influence the culture, you got to produce content that people actually want to consume. And that's what you do every day.
When the late, great Andrew Breitbart hit the scene, Andrew had the recipe, but he died. Yeah. Andrew is a friend of mine. He's a friend of Larry O'Connor's. He introduced me to Larry. Andrew came down to the studio. We talked on the day he passed away. He was on the program. And that gap was not filled until I think you guys came on, because you realize, maybe Ben Shapiro as well, infotainment is what Rush and I have been doing for 30 years, and Mark Levin, and Mike Gallagher. I mean, Rush built the mall. We just have stores in it. You guys are building the new mall, or whatever it is that is the replace the mall, which is the Ruthless podcast. And it's fun. And you have to have fun. Now, you are an R-rated show, and I want people to know that before you turn it on, because you will let fly, as every consultant I've ever known, with the occasional invective that is not appropriate for the PG-13 audience in the car driving to school and work this morning. But tell me, what is the amount of scripting that goes into an average, not the J.D. Vance. Senator Vance is coming up on my show next hour for a straightforward commentary on the Ruthless podcast fishing expedition. But what is actually the prep that goes into a show for Ruthless?
First of all, Hugh, you complimenting the show is kind of surreal. It's sort of like Peyton Manning complimenting your spiral. But yeah, very little prep. We do this for a living. So we'll do about a 15-minute production meeting around, noon or 1 o'clock most days that we record, and then we just get in front of the camera and record, and very little post-production editing, really. I mean, because this is what we do every day, And I mean, that was part of the motivation for starting Ruthless was, after a while, you get kind of sick and tired of hearing from all these people talk about the business you do every single day and not having a microphone in front of your face. And I think that's sort of our value proposition to the listener and the viewer is, we can give you some of that inside baseball because this is what we do every day. We try to win elections.
I love King of the Hill more than anything else, Michael. I love King of the Hill because I have sat through 10,000 green room conversations and on-set interviews through my 4 long years at MSNBC and NBC with people who don't know anything about how elections work. Nothing. And I have not actually been an operative since 1976 when I ran the youth campaign for Ford in Massachusetts, which wasn't exactly high up on the rung. I don't really run campaigns, I do media, but I know when people are just stupid. Did you get angry listening to just stupid takes on TV? Was that part of the motivation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look, there's a reason why, when you watch football commentary, for example, I mean, they've got a color commentator who can help make the game entertaining, but there's somebody who played the game. There's like a Kirk Herbstreit or somebody like that, somebody who was a quarterback.
Herbie is
somebody,
the best.
Yeah. And so,
yeah.
Like having the perspective of somebody who played the game informs, the viewer, the listener of like what's actually happening. And, so much of politics has become people, prognosticating or pontificating without the context of how elections are run, and how political campaigns should work.
This is why I like having Coach Urban Meyer on. Urban's a friend, and he comes on when there's an issue in college sports that we want to talk about, like NIL. And it's better to actually talk to someone who's coached a football team than to talk to an agent. They're different. It's better to talk to someone. It just is. So let's get to the heart of the question this morning, Michael. I sense irrational exuberance among Republicans. And after 2012, I'm never giving into it again because your old boss used to say, first thing you got to win. I mean, Leader McConnell said to me about a dozen times in the course of my life interviewing, first thing you got to win. Do you think Trump's going to win?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the polling averages at the national polling level, I mean, he's outperforming where he was in 2016 against Hillary Clinton and outperforming where he was in 2020 against Biden. And then you look at some of the swing state polls, which really are the only polls that matter right now. And, in some of these states, Kamala Harris hasn't had a lead for a month. So I have to feel good about all of that. That being said, what really gives me optimism isn't the polls, which are a theoretical proposition based on a turnout model that pollsters, create of what the electorate might look like. I'm more heartened by the hard data, that we're starting to get from absentee by mail and early voting. In 2020, Trump and a lot of Republicans sort of poo-pooed on early vote and absentee by mail and have embraced it this time, which is obviously to our benefit, especially in states that have a history of absentee by mail and early voting, like Arizona comes to mind, or Nevada, where they're actually mailing out ballots. Accepting the rules of the game, even if you don't like them, and trying to maximize your chance of victory there, I think is ultimately going to make the difference for Republicans in a lot of these very, very close battleground states.
Now, I want to play for you Jim Messina. I like Jim. I've done some events with Jim over the years. I've worked with Paul Begala in Carville. I'm of that age. Jim Messina went on with MSNBC's Jen Psaki yesterday and said this about the late stage, and there's a lot in this 48-second clip I'm going to let you just riff on when you hear it. This is Jim Messina yesterday.
Time. I mean, if you think about, Jen, in politics, you have three things. You have time, you have money, and you have volunteers. And the one thing of those three you can't go get more of is time. And so there's really difficult decisions being made in Wilmington right now about what you do with her time, what you do with the surrogate's time. You know, there's competing things. The press team wants her on these TV interviews. The fundraising team wants her to do one more big event in X city. The battleground states are saying we've got to have her 3 more times in Michigan. And so, you know, making those decisions becomes the most important thing. It's why you see these campaign people on TV and they look absolutely exhausted because everyone is telling them they're a band of idiots and they should do it their way. And they have to make really, really difficult decisions.
Michael Duncan of the Ruthless podcast, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells you that she's starting to see the numbers that the Republicans have seen in some of these battleground states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan, that the blue wall is starting to show a lot of cracks. It's the reason why she was in Grand Rapids over the weekend, particularly outside of the major city DMAs. You know, I'm thinking like Wayne County, outside of like Detroit DMA and places like that. The Democrats have seen a big attrition. You know, I mean, Biden's path in 2020 was just doing a little bit better in all of the outer markets in these swing states, better than Hillary Clinton did in, say, you know, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, for example, or better in Macomb County in Michigan than Clinton did. And Kamala just doesn't have that juice. You know, so in aggregate, all of these small rural counties in those blue wall states, you know, can add up to a Donald Trump victory. And so, yeah, I mean, they need her in the swing states more. Money is not their problem. And yeah, I mean,
the problem is their candidate. Stand by, Michael, for a second. I want to ask you one more question off air that I'll put onto our podcast today, having to do with candidate Kamala when we return. Back with Michael Duncan of Ruthless Podcast. Michael, if Team Harris walked in the door at Cavalry LLC, your consulting firm this morning, not on the side of Ruthless, but into your, and they brought in a big bag of gold. Enough that you guys said, yeah, you know, that's generational wealth. You went Steve Schmidt on us and Lincoln Project money. And they said, what do we do? What would your advice be to her right now?
It would be to distance from Joe Biden and find a wedge on the economy, on crime, and on the border that you could reasonably sell to swing state undecided voters. And she has been unable to formulate that. She can't articulate it in interviews. We haven't really seen it in ads, except for maybe the issue of immigration, where, you know, you remember in July or August, her campaign put out a like tough on border security ad. So I think ultimately the issue is because they stalled so long in trying to have her tell her own story, all of that tape from 2019 from the Democratic primary has defined her in millions and millions of dollars worth of ads. And so she's really missed that opportunity, but that would be my one piece of advice for her.
Okay, and if Donald Trump shows up, fresh from McDonald's, still wearing his hat and his apron, and he says to the cavalry gang, how should I close? What do you tell him?
Close on the economy. It's the number one issue for undecided voters and the number one issue in all these battleground states. And then number two, I mean, I think his coalition is formulated, right? And he's doing the right thing by trying to go out there and make media opportunities every single day, because lower propensity voters, the bigger the turnout, I think benefits him. And then the final thing I would say is continue to reinforce early voting, absentee by mail. Banking votes makes the campaign more efficient ahead of Election Day.
Michael Duncan of Ruthless, thank you, my friend. Keep coming back. Tell Smug I need to hit for the cycle. I need my triple. He's the hardest one to get, so I'm going to get Smug.
Hugh, I will make sure he gets on the show. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate everything you've done, help getting the word out about our show. You're just the best, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.